And a good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 8 of the 939 Corse Touring Car Championship for 2023. We are here this evening at Knockhill as we're on board there with, I believe that was Guy Strawbridge having a little small off there. On board now with Jack Houghton also having his own issues at this part of the lap. And I join you today, I'm pleased to report, with a little bit more tech. What I'm going to call it is, the AROC pad. As you can see, I'm able to join you with the stream itself as well. Looks like we've got some steam down there as well, so I'll try and rectify that for the next session. But here we are at Knockhill. I could actually jump in the car. I'm in the car now with Barry Clayton. Oh, I'm now fallen out of Barry Clayton's car, and I'm going to try and find a better place for me to sit with auto cam on. We've still got a little bit of stuff to sort out, but it's a new and exciting tech, which is exactly what I like to play with. We're on board at the moment with Will Inglis, currently leading this session with a delta of 1/10 of a second. And yes, as I mentioned, here at Knockhill, of course, it's fast, it's fierce, and it's a little bit frightening for some of the drivers. It is, as I say, despite how tight it is, a very fast circuit indeed. Of course, you've got the run down towards the Doofus Dip, which has seen plenty of incidents, and then You've got a couple of very tight and twisty braking zones, the likes of Leslie's, McIntyre's, and then you're running all the way up through Hislop's before you're up the hill once again, ready for another fast lap. We are just under 50 minutes to go in this session. Now we're on board with Alan Matthews. I'm actually in the car with Alan Matthews, and here he is now. We watch him just go past here. He is absolutely flying along at the moment. Looks like he's got some good pace underneath him now as we head back up that start-finish straight once again. And it'll be interesting to see just how some of the lines differ here between some of the drivers. There's some very tight hairpins that cut back on the drivers themselves. I do apologise for that small intermission in the quality runs there, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you had no visual interruptions, but we are here back on the AROC pad, as I have so christened it. And let's have a look now at how things are looking in this qualifying session then. Still being led by Will Inglis at the moment, 51.4. Of course, a very short lap here at Knockhill. But yeah, it's 51.4 for him at the moment, and that is about 3/10 clear now of Andy Brammer. A strong lap from him, with Alan Matthews not too far behind at all, just 0.02 of a second actually separating those two drivers. So we look now at P4, and that is actually Barry Clayton of 51.8, Jack Hodson, Rosie Oliver, and then Guy Swarbrick, Steve Knight, Paul Milman, Rob Whitney rounding out the running here. So 10 cars on the grid. That's not the highest numbers that we've ever seen, but I can tell you here at Knockhill that will certainly be enough to fill up the track. It's very interesting. Not something I quite planned for, is just how tight and twisty Knockhill is. So I'm going to try and run out of the way of the cars, but it's basically like, do you ever remember Crossy Road or Frogger, anything like that? It'll be just kind of my job. Oh dear, as we're on board with Guy Swarbrick as he gets a big off, and we're seeing now straight into that barrier. That is not ideal for Guy Swarbrick. See who else we got. It's going to be Paul Milman now coming up next, and here he is. Going along very nicely indeed. He's going to be running 9th in the session, so a little bit of time to be found just yet. I have also, I should mention, opened things up to the drivers. So if the drivers feel like they want to jump in to a voice channel, oh dear, that's a big off for Jack Hodson here. Whereabouts are we on the track? It doesn't matter now, we're straight back into the pits. But yeah, that is a big off for Jack Hodson. Not what he needs at this stage in qualifying. Just a few minutes to go. Luckily, very short laps, so he can get a few more runs in. Should at least get maybe 3, maybe 4 runs left in this session. He's running in P5 though, not ideal for his qualifying strategy so far. P2 then, Andrew Ram, we're on board with him at the moment. He tries to make up some time. We're at the very end of the lap now, just the run down to the checkered flag here. He's a 51 that he's looking to try and improve upon. It's 51.4. Does he do it? No, he doesn't, unfortunately. Doesn't quite match Will Inglis at this stage in qualifying. So it is 3 minutes to go now. We're on board now with Guy Swarbrick. He's got 1 second. We actually have a very close field indeed here at Knockhill. Of course, so few corners, little time really or little space really to lose time, but that does have an opposite effect, of course. It means that you've got not many places to make time here. It's been a strong racetrack, I'd say, for us so far. I've really enjoyed the running that we have done here the few times I have been able to jump on board. It was certainly chaos, I think, was the main aim of the game. As we see a little lock up there for Guy Swarbrick on board with Alan Matthews here. Andy Brammer has closed that gap up a little bit more. Has Alan Matthews been able to do the same? Yes, he has. It's now 2/10 towards Will Inglis now, whereas Andy Brammer is just 0.04 of a second down. No one able to quite get near his time just yet. We're back on board with Will Inglis actually as he heads towards the end of the second set. Now it's a 33. And we unfortunately disappear away from him just for a moment.
No bad thing. I did that corner really bad.
Oh, I believe we have a driver's joined us in the interview box. Who have we got here?
It's Will.
Ah, hello, Will. So nice to have you here. How's qualifying going for you so far? We see a strong lap. Sees you still on provisional pole with just a minute to go. You're still driving actually while you're talking to us. That's mighty impressive.
Yeah, thank you. Didn't do that very well though. Yeah, I love this circuit actually. Really technical, given that it's so short. It's really technical. It's easy to do that kind of thing. Yeah, I do like it, but there are only like 4 proper corners to worry about. But such a contrast.
Yeah, which can
some, the other kind of mountaintop circuit like Bath Hill or something, Bathurst, sorry, which is just mountains. you know, it's a similar landscape, but a world away.
Yes, I imagine there'll be plenty of antics going on at just part of the lap that you're coming up towards, and now at the very start of the lap. How are you going to run through the start of the races here then?
It's going to get so tight down into that twisty bit that we just did there. It's really going to get, you know, quite painful, and the little hilltop chicane there is going to be a mess as well. You know, there's a lot of places where people are likely to come together, so it's about trying to manage that and stay out of trouble, and still put in a good lap. You know.
As you say, yeah, this lap doesn't have many pinch points, but the ones that are there really are crucial, aren't they?
And it's getting past that's going to be the challenge, you know, I mean.
So what are you expecting from the tyres then this weekend as we just get towards the end of
hard.
qualifying
I'm finding it really hard to get heat in the back.
Okay, very interesting, because we've seen in the past, we've seen the back ends on the cars wanting to step out, especially over the elevation changes. So
do you know, that's actually useful though, Reeve? You know, because it is so twisty here. If you can get, and these are front wheel drive cars, you know, if you can get a little bit of oversteer going on like that, it can definitely help you to, you know, to get time. If you get, because otherwise, you know, you just kind of understeer everywhere, and it's better that the back's a bit squiggly here. So, but within reason. I had it super stiff to start with, and you know, had near-death experiences, which are no fun. So yeah, you know, you got to find that balance where the back's stiff enough, but not ridiculous.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for answering our questions, and thank you for doing that while also driving. That is very impressive indeed. I certainly couldn't do that.
Yeah, I wasn't very quick though. Well, I think, you know.
You say that, you have taken pole in this session, so well done.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to go and figure out how much fuel I need.
Yeah, have fun in the races. Okay. Cool, so we've just heard a little bit from Will Inglis there. That was very novel. I enjoyed that very much. Apologies if I am blowing the mic out a little bit. It's all in beta, that's what we're going to call it. It's all in beta. So our qualifying order then is Will Inglis on pole position, Andrew Rammer P2, Alan Matthews P3, Barry Clayton P4, Jack Hobson P5, Guy Swarbrick P6, Rosie Oliver P7. Then we have Steve Knight P8, Paul Millman P9, and Rob Whitney rounding out the field here. We'll join you in just a few minutes' time as we get ready to start race 1 of our double header weekend here at Knockhill. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are then on the grid at Knockhill. Just over 30 seconds to go until lights out, and it could be all to play for here. As we were just hearing from Will Inglis, not much room at all to play with here at Knockhill. So it could be anyone's game heading through those first couple of corners. as we see, it's Will Inglis and then Andrew Rammer on the front row. You say front row, it's so compact here at Knockhill. It's so close. I mean, we're looking at the first 4 rows now, and they are very close together indeed, as we have a very short run down to the first corner. It's 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away. A good launch then for Will Inglis. Andrew Rammer gets away well as well. Barry Clayton losing out ever so slightly on the getaway. We're on board at the moment with Rosie Oliver now, as she heads down into the first corner, and there's contact between Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson. Guy Swarbrick gets mixed up in that as well, spins round as he does so. Oh dear, and there's contact now between, by the looks of things, that was Andrew Brammer and that was Alan Matthews, I believe. But the top 3, given how it went for everyone else, getting away relatively comfortably after that. There's already a fairly substantial gap building up for our top drivers and the rest of the field. Then Rob Whitney started really well. In fact, of course, he was embroiled in not an ideal qualifying session, shall we say. Ended around P10 by the looks of things, and has all of a sudden found his way up into P4, a perfect place to try and get some decent points on the board. We're on board at the moment with Paul Millman. He's keeping up with the 2 cars in front there. Rosie Oliver, though, slightly under pressure from her sibling, Jack Hodson, as we get on to the start-finish straight once again. Jack Hodson seems to have a bit of a toe, a bit of a cleaner run out of the final corner before we head down towards the Doofus dip once again. Rosie, though, seems strong in the later stages of the rev range and is able to keep him behind for the time being. Heading down now into that first true corner of the lap. There aren't many of them at all, and we see it is Rosie Oliver who wins out at this point in time. Goes a little bit too wide though, dips onto the gravel, but it's okay because Jack Hodson, it's so easy to do that sometimes. You follow everything that the car in front does, but it went a little bit worse for Jack Hodson this time around. Rosie's done the same thing again as she now dropped down to P8, side by side with her sibling once again for a second. It looked like Barry Clayton had the upper hand on just Jack Hodson. Now he's got the upper hand on Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton. We go on board with Will Inglis, our fastest lap holder for this race so far. That's a strong lap to start with. He's about 2 seconds clear of the rest of the pack and leading this race rather well at this stage. Andrew Rammer, you get the feeling, is a little bit less focused on what is going on with the car in front, a little bit more concentrating on keeping Alan Matthews behind here. So let's see how this plays out for him elsewhere in the field. We've got a bit of a battle continuing on between Jack Hodson and Rosie Oliver. I'm pleased to report that after a very unfortunate incident at the start of the race, Guy Swarbrick has been able to continue on there. And that is Jack Hodson out and in the gravel once again. Just going a little bit too wide on this very tight and twisty circuit, sees him back into that gravel trap. As we have him now down in P10. Rosie Oliver is up into P8, and Guy Swarbrick seems to be on a bit of a charge here, showing what he can do. I believe Guy Swarbrick, this might be a little bit of practice. He's not, of course, at Knockhill. I believe it's Snetterton, but he has got the chance to drive some lovely 4C race cars in the coming weeks, so very jealous of that one. But imagine any track practice he can get will be beneficial here, and he's showing what he's made of. I imagine if we ever run another 4C series, he'll be pole at every session, is what I'm expecting, as Steve Knight, an unfortunate issue for him, brings a strong race here to a bit of a premature end, dropping down to P10 at the very start of the lap. That promotes Paul Millman into P4. Rob Whitney, apologies, is in P4. Paul Millman up into P5, as we have Rosie Oliver now has dropped back behind Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick seems to have benefited from a potential battle between Rosie Oliver and Jack Hodson once again, as we go on board with Will Inglis at 51.7, whereas his nearest competitors are setting 53 flats and 53.4s. He is absolutely flying along, is Will Inglis. It's very interesting, actually, just in case you missed it then, having that little bit of insight from Will regarding the tyres here. You can struggle potentially with the front, but what seems to be more of the issue is actually keeping the temperature in the rears, and that might be explaining why we often see the back end of this Giulietta WTCR car, the fantastic car that it is, actually squirreling about on some circuits. Just aren't the corners here at Knockhill to really get some temperature into that rear end, and as a result, it's kind of maybe, kind of sliding about all over the shop. However, here at Knockhill, a front-wheel drive car naturally wants to understeer. It can actually be beneficial, according to Will Inglis. Not sure if he's got a very knife-edge setup or if that is the case for the rest of the drivers. I doubt we'll hear from any more of them now, because we're in the middle of a race. Not really want to jump into a Discord call midway through that. If they do, I'll be very impressed. I was impressed enough to to see Will Inglis jump in to the session in the middle of qualifying anyway while driving, so you never know if we have that again. I'd welcome it, certainly, as we go on board with Alan Matthews, who's now got ahead of Andrew Rama. This battle for the podium here has swapped positions, but still looking comfortable nonetheless. With 20 minutes to go in this race, you rather get the feeling that Andrew Rama is going to push too much early on. He might want to conserve his tyres and try later on, especially with such a margin to the cars behind. Speaking of the cars behind, let's have a look now at how they are shaping up. That battle is looking very close indeed between Paul Millman and Barry Clayton. It's Paul Millman side by side with Barry Clayton, late on the brakes. Can he make it stick around the outside into the final corner? It'd be very impressive if he does, and I think he just might be able to here as we get back onto the start-finish straight. It's Barry Clayton with a stronger exit. Down the start-finish straight is in fact ahead of Paul Millman, and we're getting the same once again between Jack Hodson and Guy Swarbrick. Now it's Jack Hodson who wins out this time around, but only ever so slightly. Is Guy Swarbrick going to be able to fight back under braking? I'm not sure if he will be able to, and concedes a position for now. But actually the back end, is it getting away from it? That is a rallycross line there. That is Guy Swarbrick taking the Joker lap. That is very impressive indeed. As we get on board with Paul Millman. Now Paul Millman just behind Barry Clayton and Rob Whitney. Now we have a three-way battle here building up as we head towards the final part of the lap once again. This is one of my favourite types of circuits where the laps just come thick and fast. Of course we have that at Thruxton as well. Yeah, the laps just keep cascading down. There's always something going on, even with, I'm not going to say only, but with 10 cars on the grid, the track feels very full indeed. Apologies, that is, if you could hear that, is my doorbell going off, but it is Alan Matthews now 8/10 ahead of Andrew Brammer here, and he's well, in fact, yeah, that's Andrew Brammer. How have I missed that? Will Inglis 4 seconds down off the lead of this race. Sorry, I was so enthralled by what was going on in the midfield that we've missed a little bit of an error creep in for Will Inglis. Are we seeing what he was talking about there, the rear end not quite responding the way that he wanted to? Are we seeing maybe one small mistake or something like that? Seeing him now drop down to third. This promotes Alan Matthews into the lead of this race, and all of a sudden that battle that I said he might wait to maybe pounce upon was Andrew Allen. Now, no, he's going to go for it all out as we have a very close battle as it was for P2 now for the lead of this race, but he's got to be wary of Will Inglis. Has some decent pace. He was in the 51s just a couple of laps ago. He's going to be hunting down those two front runners with all that he has got. Meanwhile, elsewhere, it's Rob Whitney going off the track there. We've seen that line be taken many a time. It's through no purposeful action. That's just sometimes where the track wants to spit you off, of course. And Paul Millman's up in P5, Jack Hodson P6. And guys were in P7 in all of this, of course. Barry Clayton was once battling for that P4 spot, now finds himself down in P8, so I imagine we're going to see him work his way through the field in just a moment's time as we have cars puff of smoke under locking brakes there. And it is still Alan Matthews in the lead of this race, having the upper hand ever so slightly on that last lap compared to Andrew Ramo. It was only 400ths of a second, but it was enough to ever so slightly extend that lead. But he has lost out through the first couple of corners, has Alan Matthews, as now with just a couple of car lengths separating Andrew Ramo and the leader of this race. That gravel trap looks oh so tempting. It's so easy for the cars to just gradually fall off the circuit and slip into that gravel trap, but that hasn't happened just yet for Alan Matthews or Andrew Rama on this lap. Will it happen next time around? We hope not, of course. As the tyres get a little bit older, they'll start to struggle a little bit more. As we have Paul Millman's actually had a big off here. He's dropped down to P9 as a result, so hopefully he can recover his fortunes in this race. What I have a feeling this race could be is a bit of a race of attrition, ladies and gentlemen, with small mistakes costing you a big percentage of your lap time. Of course, a 10-second off here is 20% of your lap time, and that with a relatively close order here, especially in the midfield, that can drop you completely down the standings. So hopefully, for the driver's sake, we can keep it on the track here as Alan Matthews and Andrew Rama seem to be doing well. Seem to have the upper hand now on Will Inglis. Let's go on board with Will Inglis. He's 7 seconds off the lead of this race. And Rob Whitney, meanwhile, I was tempted to say corking the bottle, but he's very much not. What he is, he's controlling this race very nicely indeed, controlling his own race very nicely. Has the upper hand on Jack Hodson, who of course was P8, P7 moments ago. Now finds himself in P5. Let's see if Jack Hodson, his next competitor, will be able to bring a bit of a charge towards it. But Rob Whitney controlling this race well. No major mistakes when everyone else behind him seems to have had the odd mistake here or there. Rob Whitney is, if you're a betting man, I think you'd put your money on him right now to come away with the lead in the midfield battle here. He is under pressure though from Jack Hodson. Barry Clayton not too far behind, of course, so we're going to have another three-way battle being led by Rob Whitney as we go across the start-finish straight once again. And there we have a very unfortunate off for Rob Whitney. He was doing oh so well. In fact, no, he's been able to recover. That was Jack Hodson. Apologies there. He is side by side though with Barry Clayton. So Barry Clayton having a little bit of a stronger lap last time round. As we have, it's going to be very close now between these next couple of corners. Rob Whitney succumbing to the pressure of Barry Clayton there, but what can he do against Jack Hodson now? We thought the battle was going to be between Jack Hodson for P4. It's going to be the battle for P5 instead. So let's have a look at how things are going to shape up here as we go on board with Rob Whitney once again. He's very much under pressure from Jack Hodson, as you can see. Let's dive in now. So we are looking down towards the end of the lap. His lap's here, and it's going to be Jack Hodson who tries to go around the outside, but Rob Whitney strong on the defence on the inside there. Things looking rather good as we head up towards the checkered flag. Once again, not quite the checkered flag just yet, the start-finish line before we head into that first corner. The first corner rather deceptive. It's a tricky braking zone downhill here as we have, unfortunately, losing out this time around. Rob Whitney has to concede and drops down to P6, which is a shame, but it was a well-fought battle nonetheless. Rosie Oliver is just a few seconds behind, but he seems to have the measure on the pace of the lower midfield at this point in time. There we have now heading through the hairpin bed. It's Rosie Oliver, Guy Swarbrick, and then Paul Millman. A shame for Paul Millman, actually. He had a very strong start to this race, with a little bit higher up, and just unfortunately hasn't been able to keep that momentum going. Meanwhile, at the front end, as you can see, it's still Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer. Alan Matthews has actually built that lead ever so slightly now to about 1.5 seconds, and Willing Bliss seems to be in a little bit of no man's land at the moment. We're seeing about 7 seconds he is sat from the leader here, and still sat in P3, still a podium, good points nonetheless. But as we look here now, heading into the first corner, Steve Knight, some lapped traffic to contend with for Jack Hodson. That's going to split Jack Hodson and Rob Whitney up just that little bit more, and could potentially compromise Rob Whitney here. Let's see how he negotiates things, and I try and move out of the way. Instead, I'm going to completely block him as we head through the hairpin. Yeah, I didn't quite think picking this for a very tight and twisty circuit wasn't perhaps my best idea. I think what we might do is maybe wait until we have a slightly more open circuit, maybe like Donington or something like that, so we have another go at this. But I hope you enjoy a slight change here as we see Rob Whitney does get past Steve Knight in the end. It hasn't maybe compromised his race for a couple of corners, but the delta between him and Rosie Oliver, who we're seeing now just head past on the inside there at the final corner, hasn't compromised his race too much in the end, hasn't changed things for our mid-pack here. Andrew Rammer and Alan Matthews, meanwhile, still about 1.2 seconds apart. And things settling down a little bit now in this race, so it seems. It's not been the most chaotic race here at Knockhill that we've had so far. That's not to say don't be disappointed, because of course we do have the reverse good race coming up in just over 10 minutes time, so stay tuned for that one. As we go back on board with Andrew Brammer now, he is just behind Alan Matthews. A slight lock-up for Alan Matthews in front here, but he seems to have things under control so far in this race. Now, we're going to have a look at how the championship is shaping up. As we see Andrew Rama ever so slightly closing up on Alan Matthews here. There's a bit of a battle forming up between Barry Clayton, Jack Hodson, and maybe Rob Whitney as well, depending on how that P4 goes. Still within 1 second then for the lead of this race. Paul Millman and Guy Swarbrick very close together on track indeed. I expect a change in position coming up in just a few moments time, so we'll have a look at that. As late on the brakes, Guy Swarbrick tries to hang it around the outside. Unfortunately, maybe a little bit later on into the race now, the tyres not quite as happy as they once were, not able to get that move done in the end, which is a great shame. Strong effort though, great. Like to see a good attempt like that. So, as it stands in this championship, unfortunately Matt Daly not here this evening, as Will Inglis seems to now be extending his lead a little bit more as things stand. Currently in P3, but still, of course, scoring a lot more points than someone who isn't here. It's Will Inglis in the lead of this championship with 143 points to his name. And in fact, what am I doing? I can't believe I'd even consider reading out the championship standings without referring back to the AROC part. So I'm going to fade into existence now and let you know how things are looking in the championship. So tell me if anything exciting goes on behind me. Although I say behind me, it's also in front of me. As I can see you there, and it's behind me here as well. And this is the Veditas system. For those of you who are curious, you can find out more by getting in touch as we head down that start-finish straight. It's very rude of me to have my back turned to you, but it's I'm surrounded by racing. It's like my dream here. But it's Will Inglis in the lead of this championship with 143 points to his name. Then Matt Daly, as I mentioned, Matt Daly on 136. Then we have Alan Matthews with 129, so he will be making a good innings towards Will Inglis here in race 1. Let's see how race 2 turns things around, and Paul Millman will be hoping race 2 certainly turns things around there with a fairly decent off towards the infield. Not sure how that occurred, but it did. He's got back on track. Has now got ahead of Guy Swarbrick, and I think the battle between Guy Swarbrick and Paul Millman will continue on. This time Guy Swarbrick wins out, and I am sat on the rear wing of Paul Millman, so have some less downforce. You're welcome. Oh, this is very... I'm sat on the inside here. I feel like a very brave marshal as we get back onto the start-finish straight once again. And we have another look at that championship. So it's Jack Hodson in P4. Fairly big gap from P3 to P4 actually. So it's 73 points to his name. Barry Clayton in P5, as we're going to have a near 3-wide scenario here, but it will be lapped traffic coming up here as we have Alan Matthews in the middle of all of this. Our race leader, of course, he's about 1.5 seconds ahead of Alan Matthews. Apologies, Andrew Brammer there. I'm getting a little confused now. We have Barry Clayton P5 with 62 points. Andrew Brammer P6, so good number of points on the cards here for Andrew Brammer. He should jump up substantially with his current position. He's P6 with 49 points. Paul Millman P7 with 45 points. And then we drop down to Rosie Oliver P9, 44 points. Rob Whitney P11 with 30 points. Steve Knight P12 with 23. Guy Swarbrick P13 with 12. So just as we had in the... I don't remember which way I'm going. Just as we had in the single-seater action a week ago, while we are later on, and it seems that some positions are fairly settled now, we are actually seeing it is the case where, especially in the mid-pack, it's all change. As we are, of course, just over halfway into this season already, would you believe. We're on board at the moment with Paul Millman. He's conceded in that battle with Guy Swarbrick. Then Rob Whitney has got ahead of him now as well, and we have a little bit of lap traffic creeping up here. Of course, it is very easy to get lapped at such a short lap. It's still Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer leading this race, with Will Inglis dropping back a little bit further behind now. We'll have a look and see what happened there. We might be able to talk to him in the intermission and find out what was the cause of that, as it seems to have brought a very unfortunate end to his race. I'll be interested to hear what type of damage he is carrying on his car. And we didn't, of course, quite see the incident. We weren't able to see it happen, so I'd be very interested in these to find out just how it all went so wrong for him in race 1. Of course, we hold out hope for Will's sake in race 2, the reverse grid race coming up in just over 5 minutes' time. so, with just over 5 minutes to go until the end of this race. Things, it must be said, are looking up for Alan Matthews. And with all the confusion with the lap traffic there, it seems to be that Andrew Raman has dropped back off ever so slightly. Will Inglis, he's kept his delta around the same, but it's Andrew Raman who's really lost out here. Alan Matthews navigating that traffic with pure finesse, really, and now finds himself in the lead of this race. Our closest cars on track at the moment will be Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson. We've seen them battle each other so far in this race before, and it looks like it will be continuing on now. Oh dear, and that is a big off for Andrew Brammer. Could this spell disaster for his race? It will, because there is Will Inglis. He gets through and up into P2. One small error late on at the very start of the lap sees him unfortunately dropping down into P3 after so long in this race. He did very well indeed, but unfortunately it's P3 for Andrew Brammer. That is a great shame. He had some amazing pace, was keeping up with Alan Matthews. Unfortunately started to get a bit tangled up with all of the traffic on this very narrow, very short circuit. Not much space for, these days, when things are that big, but a Giulietta WTCR in the context of Knockhill is quite a big vehicle, and unfortunately for Andrew Brammer, he's fallen somewhat foul of that, and that promotes Will Inglis up into P2 now. And this is, I think damage limitation for Will Inglis in this race. I mean, you've got to say a podium certainly wouldn't have been bad even if it was a P3, but it's looking just a little bit better for him now as a P2 and not losing too many points at all in comparison to Alan Matthews, and more importantly for his championship hopes, of course, at this stage, building that gap up ever so slightly more to Matt Daly. 16 seconds now separating Alan Matthews and Will Inglis. There's no hope, I don't think, with 2 minutes to go in this race, of Andrew Brammer closing up that gap. As we look now, it's Barry Clayton leading that midfield race. Midfield race has been one of the more, I'd say, curious aspects of this race, as it's still changing about as Rob Whitney gets ahead of Guy Swarbrick here, heading down the start-finish straight. Who is that off? That is Guy Swarbrick off, in fact, as we have Will Inglis, Steve Knight, all in lapping and unlapping themselves. It's going to be Will Inglis with some lap traffic next. Rob Whitney, oh dear, I think the door maybe might be closing him a little bit, or he was carrying a bit too much speed. He ends up taking flight and has been able to get back onto the tarmac. Wasn't able to slow down enough, though, for the second corner, and ended up having a little bit of a collision with Steve Knight there. Has been able to carry on, luckily, as has Steve Knight. Steve Knight 2 laps down. It won't have affected his race too much at all. So really, as it was apparently a bit of a theme of this evening, damage limitation. And Rob Whitney, I hope, isn't retiring the car with just a couple of minutes to go. That would be a great shame. He's still running in P7, of course. No, I'm pleased to say he is not. He's been able to get back on the track. He's lost a couple of positions, though, which is a shame to see, but still some points on the cards here. There is Jack Hodson as well, as half the field now no longer on the lead lap of this race. There's a minute to go until the end here, so just a couple of laps left. And there is, I believe, a penalty potentially for Rob Whitney he needs to serve, which is really just insult to injury and rubbing salt into the wound there. Thank you very much, game. As Rob Whitney has to dive into pits. I believe he should be able to leave still in P8 because Paul Millman and Steve Knight are a little bit too far behind, but that is a little bit no. In fact, Paul Millman is going to end up in front of Rob Whitney. I believe Steve Knight might still end up being behind. Yes, he should be. In fact, the game won't let me look at Rob Whitney, and that's why, because he's completely stopped, so it will be last position for Rob Whitney. 1 point will be all he can take away, which is a great shame. Of course, at the start of this race, he was managing his pace very well indeed and managing that midfield battle, but unfortunately, it wasn't to be in the end. Just like it wasn't to be for Will Inglis in this race as we now start. In fact, we are now on the penultimate lap of this race. It's Alan Matthews now heading around the final corner on this penultimate lap, and you have to doff your hat to him, really. He's in a race that maybe has been the most chaotic Knockhill race we've ever seen. It's certainly not been easy running, and Alan Matthews has really put a foot wrong, really. Out of all the drivers here, he has to win the accolade of driver of race 1, I think, as he heads now onto that final lap. So we'll stay on board with him to celebrate a strong race here in race 1. 18 seconds ahead of Will Inglis, who was to be his nearest rival, was put under pressure, put under some good pressure by Andrew Brammer, of course, fairly low down in the standing, so will benefit immensely from what has still been a race to be proud of, I think. Not quite what it could have been in the end. Unfortunately, one very small error sees him drop from P2 to P3, but it's still a spot on the podium as it stands. So then we watch as Alan Matthews head round that final corner, gets back onto the loud pedal, climbs up that big Bathurst-style hill, as Will Inglis was calling it before, and crosses the line to take the race 1 victory. Congratulations, Alan Matthews, for a very strong start to the weekend here. And there we have Will Inglis, as we say, damage limitation after disaster at the start. He led the qualifying session, of course, led the first few laps, dropped down to P3, but recovered to P2. It will be Will Inglis going with second position in this race in the end, and closing up on him towards the end, in fact, but it wasn't enough. Rounding out the podium, it's Andrew Brammer who comes home P3 to round out that podium. And then we have Barry Clayton in all of the chaos of the midfield, was dropping back, climbing up, dropping back, and climbing up again. He finally climbed up to P4, top of the midfield then. Congratulations, Barry Clayton. Strong race in the end, as Jack Odson. Again, likewise, plenty of chaotic action, but will come home P5. And his sibling, who was enjoying battle with him for so long, she will come home P6, and classified P6, a lap down. Then we have Guy Strawberry classified P7, Paul Millman coming into the pits as P8, Steve Knight P9, and Rob Whitney in the end will be classified P10, but an unfortunate end to the race for him. So then, that rounds out our running for race 1. We'll join you in just a few minutes' time for race 2, the reverse grid race, so don't go anywhere. Well, welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. We're on the grid for another race here at Knockhill. We're looking at my car for some reason, which is not ideal. I think we should be looking instead at some of our racing drivers. Just over 30 seconds to go until lights out now, and I have made some tweaks, as I hope you can see. Oh, no, that hasn't gone very well at all. Never mind. But let's have a look at the grid then. It is Guy Swarbrick and that is Rosie Oliver on the front row. We have Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson on the second, although, as we discussed before, they're not too much of a row to speak of, really. It's more just sort of a collection of Juliettes at the front end of the field. And then we have, that is Will Inglis and Andrew Rammer. We also have 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away for the start of race 2 here. Let's see how things play out. Running down towards that first corner then. It's a big contact actually for Will Inglis. He heads straight into the side of Rosie Oliver. I think he was potentially just a little bit too brave at the very start of this race. Rosie Oliver's car, if that has survived that with very little damage, I'll be oh so impressed. Unfortunately, I don't think it has. Maybe it has. Let's see. She seems to be able to carry on, which is what we like to see. But Will Inglis, unfortunately, a little bit too fast into that first corner, and there was just no room where a Giulietta could fit on the inside there. So down into P10 for Will Inglis this time around. As we see Jack Otten and Guy Swarbrick positions changing between them as well. Jack Otten up into P2 as we head down towards that first corner once again now. Oh dear, Guy Swarbrick having a big off here and actually collecting Alan Matthews, or rather Alan Matthews collecting him nowhere. That's one of the downsides of such a tight and twisty circuit. One small error up in front of you and through no one's following, just a small racing incident. There's nowhere to hide here at Knockhill. So little tarmac to play with. Guy Swarbrick dropping further down the order. That promotes Will Inglis up into P8, and this is now a chance for Will Inglis to show off his pace. As we were discussing with him not too long ago, there aren't too many overtaking opportunities here at Knockhill, so it's one thing to have the pace, it's another thing to be able to overtake. And then we have Jack Hodson just behind Rob Whitney there. 0.5 of a second separating these two drivers. In fact, there we can see all the way up through his laps as the entire field in front of us, still of course very close together at this stage in the race. Meanwhile, let's have a look at what's going on. The front end, it is Andrew Rammer having a look up the inside into the final corner. Rosie Oliver does leave the door open ever so slightly, and it is Andrew Rammer who's able to just squeeze past there. Rosie Oliver does concede the position now, still in P2 for the time being. The question we ask is for how long, because there is Barry Clayton with a 52.1, the fastest lap of this race so far. Meanwhile, further down the order, Jack Hodson and Rob Whitney trading positions. Rob Whitney potentially having a bit of an issue there, and he is. What a shame for Rob Whitney. Hopes were so high with a strong showing at the start of race 1. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be at the end of race 1, and it doesn't look like it's going to be here in race 2 either. I say that, there's over 20 minutes to go. Anything could happen just yet. As we have a look now into that final corner once again, where it went oh so wrong for Rosie Oliver on the previous lap. She tries a completely different strategy. She echoes what Andrew Rammer did last time around, and it worked. She was able to defend well against Barry Clayton, heading down that start-finish straight once again. It's Rosie Oliver just ahead of Barry Clayton now, and into the first couple of corners we go. 0.8 of a second separating Barry Clayton and Rosie Oliver. And the question we ask once again is, will Rosie Oliver be able to hold off the almighty Barry Clayton as we head through the middle sector now, bounding over those sausage curbs through the hairpins? It was one of the favourite parts of the track for the drivers. It certainly looks like a lot of fun as we head through towards the end of the lap once again. Oh dear, that is a big off for Rob Whitney. Another disappointing impact in this race, and unfortunately we see a retirement for Rob Whitney. So nil point this time around, he drops out of this race. Meanwhile, that's Andrew Brammer who leads from Rosie Oliver. Rosie Oliver doing an almighty job keeping ahead of Barry Clayton here. Let's have a look at how that battle is faring, and it's side by side near enough between these two drivers. It seems to be Rosie has the upper hand in terms of straight line performance, and that could be making an all-important difference in this race. So Steve Knight has an off here. He needs to recover the car as quickly as possible, as Rosie Oliver looks to have had a big off herself, and that is a bitter disappointment. Can we see what is going on there? She drops all the way down to P6, and unfortunately that is a bit of an end to her podium hopes in this race. In all of this, Will Inglis, of course, P10 at the very start of this race, works his way up to P3. A great recovery for Will Inglis then, and running very nicely indeed, with a chance that is, well, more than a chance at the spot on the podium. It is a podium as things stand. Now his nearest rivals are Alan Matthews, who in the end won out in race 1, so he has to watch out for the car behind, and then a couple of cars up in front of him, it's Andrew Brammer, who of course he was able to just about get past, but otherwise throughout the rest of the race, in race 1 it looked like Will Inglis didn't match the pace of. So we'll see how things progress later into this race. There we see up the inside of Steve Knight, Will Inglis able to get on past and clear that lap of traffic. Oh dear, and another offer. This time it's for Jack Cotton, running in P5, potentially under pressure now from Rosie Oliver. Drops back from Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews, it must be said, has somewhat been dispatched off courtesy of Will Inglis. Will Inglis comfortably running very close indeed now. Not quite close enough to maybe make an overtake attempt, but certainly a little bit closer this time around to Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton only 2.5 seconds away from Andrew Brammer, and this is a strong showing from Barry Clayton so far. We weren't able to see too much of throughout the race 1. He was embroiled in that mid-pack battle. This time we're seeing what he is made of. And then we have up the inside there, Paul Millman on the defence against Guy Swarbrick. That was going to be a brave one from Guy Swarbrick, who was able to hang it around the outside. We saw it go right for him, we saw it go wrong for him in race 1, but it didn't work out for him this time around, unfortunately for him. Jack Cotton, a very slight lock up there, is able... Oh dear, that is someone in the background, I believe. That is Steve Knight. Yes, that is Steve Knight having a big off and into the barriers on the inside of the circuit there. What a shame for him. As we continue on with Paul Millman under pressure from Guy Swarbrick. We saw these two battling quite a bit throughout race 1, and it looks to be continuing on in race 2, I am pleased to report. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the field, we see just a few tenths of a second now separating Will Inglis and Barry Clayton. Fastest lap, of course, going to Will Inglis. He is really on a charge now as we close up through the first couple of corners. 51.5 for Will Inglis. And just a tenth of a second separating these two drivers now. Up the inside there, Will Inglis stuck a nose in. Did it work out? No, it didn't. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to quite get the exit that he would have wanted. But still a faster lap all around that previous attempt, and this is really where all the action is in this race at this point in time. The headlight on for Will Inglis, bit of intimidation from the car behind there. That's what we like to see, some typical touring car action, of course, as we head through the hairpin section once again. It's only 0.4 of a second here at Knockhill. They are using all of the tarmac, a little bit of the grass and gravel as well. A puff of smoke there from Andrew Rammer up in front. Will Inglis oh so close on the inside line, and actually goes up on the two wheels. And this is very close indeed. Not getting word, actually, a bit of a report from Rob Whitney as to how the car was feeling towards the end of race one. He was saying that the tyres were basically like chewing gum, were the words that he used towards the end of the first race. So that is not what we like to hear. So tyre management, clearly a bit of an important aspect of this evening's racing. It was potentially the downfall of Rob Whitney. It seems to be that Barry Clayton could be the downfall of himself there as we head through the first corner. The back end just stepping out. Some drivers, myself included, like that little bit of action from a front-wheel drive car as it can promote, maybe not, well, it is oversteer of course, but can allow the nose to dive into the corner just a little bit nicer as we watch Alan Matthews head through the hairpin section now. But it's a very close battle going on between Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton and Will Inglis here as we head down towards the final lap once again. What I'm finding impressive about this battle actually is in all of this running, they are keeping up with Andrew Brammer, and as we head into that first corner once again, it'll be interesting to see how that delta changes. They are not seemingly slowing each other down that much with their battling. We've seen 51.5s from Will Inglis so far. He's in the 51.7s, but more importantly for these two guys, it's 51.8s at the moment for Andrew Brammer, and we have just passed the halfway mark in this race, and they seem to be on a bit of a charge. If anything, in fact, despite it being the reverse grid race, we're actually a little bit, well, I say despite. Of course, the whole point of a reverse grid race is that it closes up the field, and it means that we have a closer race for further into the race. Now, often with all the chaos that ensues, that can often be the opposite of what happens. But here, with 10 minutes to go in this race, we have most drivers on the lead lap of this race. Steve Knight, unfortunately, having to pit for damage, of course, but the top 8 separated by 26 seconds, and within that we have little pockets of battles occurring, the likes of Guy Swarbrick and Jack Hodson. Rosie Oliver keeping head of Paul Milne for the time being. Let's see how that battle develops, if it does. And then we have Alan Matthews actually in a little bit of no man's land at this point in time, because all of the major battling action is going on up in front of him, about 5 seconds in front of him that is, and it is between Barry Clayton and Will Inglis. Will Inglis there, the back end stepping out on the exit of the third corner. That is a disaster for him in this race. He was talking about in qualifying, as I've mentioned so many times now, that a little bit of oversteer is what he liked. I have a feeling maybe that was a bit too much oversteer and he couldn't get enough temperature into the rear tyres so far in this race. That now puts him very much under threat from Alan Matthews. Remember when I said that he was in a bit of no man's land? Not anymore, he is not. He is very much enjoying this battle, because there it is. The battle is over. Will it be over, in fact, though, because going up the inside, a bit of a switcheroo effect there, to quote a certain commentator, as we head down the start-finish straight. Near enough side by side between Matthews and Will Inglis. Now it's going to be Will Inglis who takes the inside line here. They make contact heading into that first corner. Both drivers spat off into the gravel. Who will get back on track the quickest? It will be, oh dear, I wasn't quite expecting that one. I'm not sure if Alan Matthews couldn't quite get his car stopped, or if that was a bit of a Tarquini I'm going for first style incident there, but that was Will Inglis able to get back on track first, and then Alan Matthews seemingly just didn't have control of the car yet, and made contact with Will Inglis, and it is Will Inglis somewhat worse off in that situation in the end, down into P4, some lap traffic up in front of him. Alan Matthews with no front wing to speak of now is up into P3, but this time around it's 14 seconds down on the leading two in this race. Speaking of the leading two, it is Barry Clayton and Andrew Brammer. Now are we seeing the tyres start to drop off a little bit because we're no longer into the 51s, we're into the 52s. It's the second half between Barry Clayton and Andrew Brammer, and Barry Clayton is the one who needs to make the difference here in this race. That last lap at 52.0 of course, and yeah, he'd be in the 51.8, 51.7s if he can to try and close that battle to the lead. He is doing so on this lap, at least. That gap now stands at 1.2 seconds, so the battle, I think, will be brewing in just a lap or two's time, if not a little bit more than that, but we are going to have another battle for the lead, I'm pleased to report. As we get back onto that start finish straight now, 1.3 seconds to Barry Clayton, and these are some of the closest cars on track. Not the closest. Remember when I said we might have a battle between Rosie Oliver and Paul Millman? I was wrong. We're going to have a battle between Rosie Oliver, Paul Millman, and potentially Jack Hodson as well. As we head into that final corner, it is Rosie Oliver who was a little bit slower, does take the inside line there and defends well, pretty much position car in the middle of the track, but now the battle is very much on. It is Paul Millman and Jack Hodson making a two-pronged attack approach as we head into that first corner, and Rosie tries to take a little bit too much out the corner, and this is what we're seeing when we're seeing these big offs and into the infield there. We're seeing drivers getting a little bit too greedy with the curbs on the inside of the first corner and being spat off into the infield as a result, and as a result of that she drops all the way down from P5 to P8, which is a great shame. She's leading, driving a very nice race other than that, but that is just racing. Sometimes it is very much a harsh business, as we see Will Inglis, and certainly attest to that one small error sees him now down in P4. Meanwhile, two drivers who haven't really had too much in the form of an error so far in this race with 7 minutes to go, it is Andrew Brammer and Barry Clayton. Now 0.4 of a second separating these two drivers, and the battle for the lead is on, I am pleased to report. Heading up Hislop once more, the final corner to negotiate here. 0.4 of a second, make that 0.5 of a second under braking, a lock up under braking as well, and back onto the loud pedal as we head down towards the first corner once again. A little bit faster on the previous lap there for Barry Clayton, and it was a 51.8, a puff of smoke on the lockup for both drivers through that first corner. I am sure they're going to be playing it as safe as possible at this stage in order to try and avoid any unfortunate late race incidents. Jack Hodson gets ahead of Paul Millman meanwhile, and up into, no, it's a bit of a battle forming up here between Paul Millman, Steve Knight and Jack Hodson. Steve Knight, of course, is lap traffic. Let's see how that lap traffic affects this battle, but it is Paul Millman who wins out this time round. Jack Hodson, who does have the inside line, and going into that first corner there's a slight bit of contact, but both drivers keep pointing the right direction, which is what we like to see. Not a given through the first corner, and Paul Millman still continues on in the lead. Meanwhile, we go on board with Barry Clayton and Andrew Brammer. They are only half a second apart as we head through the start-finish straight once again, and it must be said, Barry Clayton, it seems, has the upper hand in terms of straight line performance, but only ever so slightly, and a big lock up there as we head through the first corner, rather than taking too much out of the curbs and pointing in the wrong direction, of course. And speaking of pointing in the wrong direction, we could be seeing that in a moment's time, as they are very close on a very narrow track here at Knockhill. It is Jack Hodson who goes for the outside line here, who might win out. Paul Millman who goes for the switchback, and in fact it's going to be Jack Hodson up the inside line now as we head down the start-finish straight once again, side by side here, and it's going to be Jack Hodson who has the inside heading into that first corner, as there is contact between these two drivers once again, but just like we saw between Andrew Brammer and Barry Clayton, no one off the track, which is what we like to see. Paul Millman very strong on the defensive here. We've seen some great defensive drives in the past from Paul Millman. As we head up the start-finish straight, the battle for the lead continues on. Barry Clayton gets a nose out, gets a better run out to the final corner, has the inside line here, and bounces over that curve. Very brave for him to do so, but it works out for him in the end. Under 5 minutes to go in this race now, and it's 3/10 ahead of Andrew Rama for Barry Clayton. A strong race for Barry Clayton. That overtake was threatened for a little while. It has been completed now, but I get the feeling that Andrew Rama might fight that back if he can, if he has the pace to late on in this race. Meanwhile, Jack Cotton gets ahead of Paul Millman. Paul Millman, it seems, has nothing to respond with. Guy Swarbrick gets ahead of Steve Knight there. Of course, Steve Knight is lap traffic at this stage. Rosie Oliver, the last driver on the lead lap of this race for the time being. But Jack Cotton, the back end, gets very twitchy indeed as he goes off the track. He is able to collect it, but costs him a lot of time doing so. Still, of course, better to do that than to let it slide. But it is now Paul Millman back into the lead of this battle, so it continues on for the final few laps of this race. And as we head through that final corner, once again, Paul Millman has the inside line there, but it is Jack Cotton who is right on his tail, following his every line. In fact, through that final corner, does he have the upper hand in terms of straight line performance? Well, we're about to find out. As we head down that start-finish straight once again, it is going to be Jack Cotton who has a look up the inside. Nothing he can do from there, though, and instead he forces Paul Millman into mistake, which turns out to bite him as Paul Millman collects it, but comes across his path, and that is Paul Millman and Jack Cotton off and into the infield. And that is a very unfortunate racing incident there, folks, because Paul Millman actually is able to recover it, but Jack Cotton goes further off to the infield and instead settles for P8. No, you can't have any malice towards Paul Millman for that one, really. All he was doing was trying to catch his car. He would have been better off, as it turns out, just, of course, cutting the track, but he did, in fact, catch it. Unfortunately for unfortunately for Jack Cotton, it was just too close for his liking. I want to say congratulations, though, for Paul Millman for catching that. That was a very big snap of oversteer. That is a great save, potentially saving the weekend, and he was able to catch it, of course. Andrew Rama was looking quite close at some points. Unfortunately, not quite close enough. He's going to have some lap traffic to contend with, although he needs to be ahead of that now. Unfortunately, in the final dying laps of this race, he's not quite close enough to make any form of attack at this stage. We'll see what he can do. Something left in this race. All of those unfortunate incidents have meant that Guy Swarbrick has been able to jump up into P5, but as we're seeing, he's making the odd mistake here or there, going into the gravel a little bit, a little lock up here and there, and that is allowing Paul Millman to keep up with him and right on his tail as well. I sometimes get the feeling, looking at the way Guy Swarbrick drives, he's clearly got some pace in him. I look back to podiums at Monaco, podiums at other tracks as well. Unfortunately for him, sometimes I get the feeling that he might be overdriving the car every now and again, which is something I'm very guilty of myself. And that overdriving car is just forcing a bit of understeer here or just spitting the car off the track, which is a shame because he could find himself more often in positions like this, running in P4, P5, and if he just brings the car home safely, he will end up winning out. Hopefully, he is not listening. I know he's not listening in, but hopefully he is through osmosis maybe picking up my utterly useless advice. And he will be able to, for his sake at least, for his championship's sake, he will be able to bring it home in this position as he defends well there from Paul Millman under braking. Uses the small track dimensions and the width of the car to his advantage to keep Paul Millman at bay. Paul Millman, I imagine, might be trying something around the outside if he can. Guy Swarbrick, though, beautifully defends, but there wasn't a car's width, but Paul Millman says, I don't care, thank you very much, I will just go onto the dirt, and that was a well-defended overtake, actually, for Guy Swarbrick, because that forced Paul Millman too deep onto the other end of the track, and Guy Swarbrick is up into P5 once again. So a strong defensive showing here from Guy Swarbrick, what could have been in this race, as we have a look at the front runners with just 15 seconds left on the timer now. Andrew Rama is keeping up with Andrew Rama. He's just not quite as close as he would want to be, I am sure. As we go back on board with Guy Swarbrick here, he has Paul Millman for company. We are on the penultimate lap of this race now. The lower midfield actually is not too far separated at all. Just 3 seconds separating P5 down to P8. You get the feeling that if anything were to happen between P5 and P6 here, there could be some good mistakes to capitalise upon, which on the retailer commentary bingo you can tick off for the first time of the season, which is a penalty curve. Usually that gets said quite early on as Jack Hodson gets ahead of Rosie Oliver, but will it be far enough ahead to keep the division into the first corner? It was a late race overtake there, as we are able to actually see in this frame our race leaders, and it's Rosie Oliver who has a big off. Will Barry Clayton be able to negotiate that? He will be able to, and Rosie Oliver, unfortunately, it is a very late race incident there, nothing to be recovered there. And it is going to be P8 in the end for Rosie Oliver. Meanwhile, it is Barry Clayton on the lead, in the lead of this race. Not sure what happened with Andrew Brammer. He's dropped back, much like he did in the first race. Actually, I get the feeling it might have been the same issue. Either way, 8 seconds ahead of Alan Matthews. He should be able to bring it home in P1. In all this, we haven't really talked about Alan Matthews as P3 that much, but it is P3. A good points all around if things go this way. As we're on board with Barry Clayton then, it is a strong drive in the end. He waited to put the pressure on Andrew Rammer, and he was awarded with some strong points in the end. It is race 2 victory for Barry Clayton. It's going to be P2 for Andrew Rammer, a well-deserved P2. It's P3 and P2, so a very strong weekend for his points tally, as we have Alan Matthews coming home P3 in the end to round out the podium. I get the feeling that last time we were at Knockhill, Andrew Rammer did very well at the circuit. Might be a favourite of his. As we have Willie Bliss coming home then in P4. Commiserations, not the strongest of weekends in the end, but still some good points nonetheless, as he decides to take flight into the race, of the race coming to an end, as it will be with Paul Millman battling it with Jack Hodson. Guy Swarbrick coming up the start-finish straight once again. But it will be good points in the end for Guy Swarbrick. He'll be coming home P5 as Jack Hodson and Paul Millman, much like we have with Perez and Alonso. A photo finish, but it goes to Jack Hodson in the end. So commiserations to Paul as those two battled until the very bitter end. Then we have Rosie Oliver coming home P8 and Steve Knight classified P9 in the end. Rosie Oliver bringing it in on the infield by the looks of things. Are we going to have any victory donuts? That's what I'm curious about. We are going to have some victory donuts, I'm pleased to report, which is exactly what I was looking for. Or an attempt at some victory donuts, it seems. They appear to be going well. Alan Matthews seems to be doing them beautifully. As I'm going to jump on screen to have a look at some of these. We're on the Alan Matthews merry-go-round, as you can see. Well executed. He must be using the handbrake here, I get the feeling. Do we have anyone else? I've set it to auto cap. I think that is Willing Bliss. Someone's having an impact with him. No, it's Rosie Oliver by the looks of things. And that is how we're going to round out this evening, folks, as we are still on board with Rosie Oliver. She's still mowing the lawn on the inside of the track here, which I'm sure the organisers are very appreciative of. My microphone has completely moved itself away from my face, as we have Alan Matthews also partaking in the victory celebrations on the inside of the final corner there. Headlights on as well. It's looking like a little bit of a disco there. But I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating this evening. A little bit novel, as you can see. Apologies, the tech was a little bit kind of iffy here or there. It's all my organisation. I haven't quite planned it out as well as I really should have. But of course, it's a beta run, it's a test run to see how you guys like it. So I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I have enjoyed taking part, and we'll catch you next week for some more single-seater action, and of course in a fortnight's time for the next round of the touring cars. So from me, it's a good night.